Hey guys, tonight we step into a place so small, so silent, and so unshakably final. It might just make your bedroom feel like a palace. You're walking barefoot, one step at a time, down a narrow dirt path behind the monastery. The morning fog curls around your ankles like unsure fingers. Ahead, a tiny doorway waits, a dark arched frame cut into a thick stone wall. This is not the beginning of a tour. It's the end of your life as you know it. Because once that door closes behind you, it's never opening again. You're about to become an anchorite, a religious hermit of medieval Europe, voluntarily sealed inside a stone cell for the rest of your natural life. No errands, no visitors, no changing your mind. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you listening from and what time is it right now? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You feel the cold of the stone threshold under your heel. The monk behind you mumbles a final blessing. A few villagers watch from a distance, hands clasped, unsure whether to be moved or terrified. And then, thud. The door shuts, iron latch, wooden beam, scraping sound. You hear it being sealed. The world falls silent. You don't get a do-over. This is your grave now. The cell, your cell, is no bigger than a pantry, maybe 6 feet by 10, with a dirt floor, one cramped alcove for prayer, and a simple wooden cross above a stone shelf that pretends to be a bed. There's a slit in the wall, your only window to the church altar beside you. Through that, you'll witness Mass. You won't participate. That's too worldly now. You kneel automatically. The stone is sharp on your knees and your wool robe is already picking up dust. The air smells of cold clay and beeswax. You're supposed to be at peace, but your pulse is doing jazz drumming against your ribs. The rule of St. Benedict said that monks must die to the world. But you've skipped the metaphor. You volunteered for this. Maybe you lost someone. Maybe your sins were too heavy. Maybe you thought this would make you holy. Maybe your village thought you were just weird enough to be divine. Historians still argue whether these anchorites were honoured saints or socially acceptable exiles. But what's certain is this. No matter how noble your reasons, you're stuck. The Latin word anchorite means to withdraw. But this isn't a retreat. It's a complete vanishing. In front of you, a single candle flickers on the altar. Wax drips slowly down like a tiny hourglass that never stops. You suddenly remember that the sealing ceremony included your last rites. That's right, you're alive, but officially dead. There's even a burial service, not for drama, for the record. Some anchorites, like the famous Julian of Norwich, were celebrated mystics. Others faded nameless into the walls of forgotten villages. Some cells had names carved over them. Others just disappeared into the stone. The door behind you has no handle. You can't open it from your side, and even if you could, leaving now would be more than a scandal. It'd be heresy. This is not a hobby. It's not quiet quitting with incense. It's a one-way pact with God, pain, and stone. Outside, the breeze flutters faintly, but it doesn't reach you. Inside, the silence settles in, thick as wool. You start to realise the world isn't going to check on you. This is not a retreat from noise. It's the arrival of permanent stillness. You shuffle to the back of the cell, 3 steps, and find a bucket. Ah, that's your toilet. Charming. No, you won't be emptying it. Someone from the monastery will slide it out when they feed you. Through a slot in the wall. You'll never see them. You'll hear footsteps, then a scrape, then they'll be gone. There's no one to complain to. There's a single loop of rope hanging beside the altar slit. It connects to a small bell in the monastery. It's for emergencies, real ones, like dying. Don't be tempted to ring it because you're lonely. That's not an emergency. That's the whole point. Your job is prayer, non-stop, rhythmic, eternal, hours marked by the divine office. Matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, nun, vespers, compline. Get used to that lineup. It's your new calendar, your daily soundtrack, and your only schedule. And that schedule starts before dawn. You squint into the dark corner beside the bed shelf. There's a small hole dug in the ground. No, it's not for storage. That's your grave. Some hermits kept their coffins in the cell to sit on, sleep on, or just admire. Morbid? Absolutely. Motivating? That's the idea. Every prayer you whisper echoes into the pit you'll one day occupy. Weirdly enough, some anchorites were women, many actually. In England, female anchorites sometimes outnumbered males, and they weren't always old, some were just teenagers. Imagine locking yourself away forever before you even finished growing. You sit cross-legged on the floor now. You try to meditate to silence your thoughts. Instead, your brain screams, "What have I done?" A draft curls around your ankles again. You look up. There's no visible wind, just stone, shadows, and the flicker of candlelight. It's going to be a long night. And this is just day one. You wake up. Well, you jerk awake. Your neck hurts from leaning against the wall, and there's a thin strand of drool dried down your chin. Welcome to your first full morning as a resident of this charming medieval cube. There's no rooster, no alarm clock. Just the rhythm of your own breathing, and the dim light that begins to filter in through the narrow slit overlooking the church. The air hasn't changed. Still cold. Still damp. Still scented faintly of limestone and ancient incense. Your knees crack as you shift positions, your robe bunched beneath you like a wrinkled shroud. Now, about that bed. Remember how cozy your mattress is back home? The way it moulds to your body, the nice pillows, the weighted blanket. Yeah, forget all of that. Your bed here is a flat slab of stone with a thin layer of straw. And straw, by the way, does not offer orthopedic support. It also doesn't stay in place. Half of it migrated during the night, and the rest now has some mystery insects. Sleep tight. There's no fire, not because they forgot, because it's forbidden. Warmth is a luxury, and you didn't sign up for that. You chose spiritual refinement through physical discomfort. Monks out in the monastery at least get shared fires during winter. You get a little more humility every time you shiver. The walls are sweating, quite literally. Condensation beads down the inner surfaces, like the cell itself is sighing. You touch one with the palm of your hand. It's so cold it bites, and no windows. Just that tiny vertical slit facing the altar, and a smaller one built into the outer wall with a thick wooden shutter. A squint, they call it. Through it, the world might occasionally peek in, but mostly it stays closed. And that's the idea. No distractions. If you're lucky, the monastery left you a copy of the Psalms, handwritten naturally on vellum. That means calfskin. And yes, some monks did it purely by candlelight, which explains why so many medieval manuscripts feature a line that just trails off. Scribe probably fell asleep mid-sentence. You sit now on the ground, book in hand, trying to read the sacred verses. But your hands shake from the cold, and your fingers keep locking up. Eventually, you crawl over to the wall with the food slot. It's just a horizontal chute in the stone, barely big enough to push a bowl through. There's a scraping sound. Then something slides in. Breakfast. It's porridge. Of course it's porridge. Medieval porridge is a universal constant. Oats, water, maybe a pinch of salt if the monastery's feeling fancy. No honey, no berries, no oat milk or chai spices. Just grey, lumpy sludge. You eat it with your fingers because guess what? No cutlery. Forks exist, sure, but they're controversial. Some church leaders actually thought they were diabolical. Historians still argue whether this was about symbolism, hygiene, or just plain stubbornness. Still, porridge beats fasting, and you'll be doing plenty of that too. Next comes prime, one of the day's first scheduled prayers. You shuffle to your prayer nook, a stone ledge where you kneel facing the altar slit. Through it, you can barely make out the flicker of candles. You hear distant chanting. The monks are starting their day too. But they don't look at you. They don't wave. They might not even say your name again. You're part of the monastery, but not in it. You mumble your Latin verses trying to follow the cadence. Your breath fogs the air with each syllable. Some anchorites were allowed to sing aloud, but most kept it low and meditative. If you got too enthusiastic, they might think you've gone loopy. And the bar for loopy in a sealed cell is very, very low. The rule of silence applies here, and it's not just about speech, it's about noise. Anchorites practice something called custodia oculorum, guarding the senses. No music, no gossip, no birdsong, just the occasional sound of distant church bells and your own heartbeat. In time, they say, you start to hear other things. Not mystical voices, not necessarily, just your thoughts, turned up to 11. The way your mind wanders from scripture to memory to fantasy and back again, looping endlessly. Some found peace in that. Others, not so much. You finish the prayer and sit back. Your knees ache, your feet have gone numb, You wriggle your toes trying to get the blood flowing again, and you think, how did anyone do this for 20, 30, even 50 years? Well, some didn't. Records exist of anchorites breaking down. Not everyone makes it. A few pounded on their walls, begging to be released. That rarely went well. You can't quit being dead to the world. And even if they did let you out, the shame would stick like tar. Still, despite the hardship, people kept choosing this life, especially women. In 13th century England, many female anchorites, called anchoresses, entered the cells with full ceremony. Some even gave sermons through their squints. Julian of Norwich, the most famous, wrote visions that still puzzle theologians today. But for every Julian, there were dozens of nameless hermits who simply disappeared into stone. And then there's your cellmate. No, not a person. A rat. You hear it now, scuttling across the edge of your straw bed. It pauses. You pause. A game of medieval chicken. Then it dashes out of sight again. Probably toward the crumb of bread you didn't notice yesterday. At least it's company. Kind of. The cold creeps in again, worming through your robe. You draw it tighter, but it doesn't help. Your stomach growls and your back twinges from the unforgiving stone floor. You start to wonder how long you'll last. And the unsettling part? The monks are wondering the same thing. You know what's weirder than being completely alone? Being alone with a schedule. Your days, from now until the day you die, are broken into strict liturgical hours. The bells you faintly hear from the monastery aren't just pretty background music. They're your marching orders. And by marching, of course, we mean shuffling awkwardly across 6 feet of stone with a leg cramp. The divine office governs your life now. You've already done prime this morning. Up next, terce, then sext, then nun, then vespers, and finally complin. Sleep, wake, repeat. But the real punch to the gut, the one you really won't survive in spirit, it's matins. Matins happens while it's still dark. Really dark. Think 2 or 3 in the morning. You're half asleep. Your joints hurt. Your mouth is dry from snoring into burlap. And yet, like some grim medieval alarm clock, your inner guilt nudges you awake. Matins isn't optional. You must rise, kneel, and chant psalms in total solitude. The church bells might not even ring at that hour. You're supposed to just know. And here's the kicker. This goes on every day. No weekends, no breaks, no holidays. Even Christmas doesn't earn you a free pass. In fact, holidays mean more prayers. Surprise, you stumble through your lines. What? Candlelight flickers against the opposite wall. You keep losing your place in the psalms. It's hard to stay focused when your mind drifts to food, warmth, or that time someone smiled at you in the village 5 years ago. The rule tells you distraction is a form of spiritual weakness. Of course it is. Monastic life is all about structure, discipline, and spiritual clarity. But anchorites take it to the next level, literally removing every earthly element to find God in the silence. Historians still argue whether this made them more devout, or just more likely to lose their grip on reality. So yes, 5 prayers before sunrise, every single day. And no, you don't get breakfast after. Not unless the monastery decides you've earned your soggy barley. Some days they forget, or maybe they just forget. Either way, you learn to live with a hollow ache in your gut, like a little bell of its own ringing beneath your ribs. You sit, frozen fingers clasped in prayer. The cell is silent, but your joints pop as you shift. A mouse rustles behind your straw pile. A drop of condensation drips onto your shoulder. It's okay, though. You're supposed to suffer. The medieval mindset saw physical hardship as a path to purity. Suffering wasn't a sign something was wrong. It meant you were doing it right. Still, you wonder if everyone else is struggling too. Do the monks out there ever cheat a little? Sneak a nap between terce and sext? Do they look at each other and roll their eyes when they chant the same psalm for the 10th time this week? You'll never know. You'll never see their faces again. There's something poetic and a little terrifying about that. The only human face you might glimpse now is Jesus, painted, carved, or burned into the wood. Maybe a tiny icon rests above your altar slit, staring back at you with sad, knowing eyes. If he seems familiar, that's because every medieval icon sort of looks the same. Long face, soft eyes, unquestionably disappointed in you. But hey, this is still only the beginning. Eventually you begin to internalize the rhythm. The hours blur together, but your body starts waking up for matins on its own. Your stomach stops growling. Sort of. Your knees still hurt, but now you know which spots on the stone are less cruel. The human brain adapts faster than you'd think. Whether that's resilience or surrender is up for debate. Your hands are raw from constant folding in prayer. You develop little sores from kneeling in the same spot. Your robe stiffens in the cold, and yet there's a strange calm beginning to form around the edges. Monks used to talk about a holy stillness, a state where, after enough silence, you start to hear something deeper than noise. Some said it was the voice of God. Some said it was their own soul, finally loud enough to be heard. And some anchorites said nothing at all. One story tells of an anchoress who refused to speak for 15 years, not once, not even when a bishop visited. They say he asked her, "Sister, have you nothing to say?" And she shook her head, smiled, and pointed at the Psalms. Other records describe hermits whispering to birds, naming the cracks in their walls, or baptizing spiders. Were these signs of divine oneness, or just signs of starvation? Historians still argue that one too. Back in your cell, you scratch your leg absently. Then you realise your fingernails are sharp. Too sharp. It's been weeks since you've had any grooming tools. Your hair's matted. Your teeth feel gritty. Medieval dental care was, to put it mildly, non-existent. You start to understand why saints in manuscripts are always depicted with halos and blank expressions. They weren't glowing with holiness. They were sleep-deprived and barely holding it together. One minor comfort: the daylight through your squint starts to shift. Afternoon is coming. That means Vespers is soon. And after Vespers, sometimes, you get a piece of dried fruit. It's the highlight of your day, possibly your week. You sit and wait for the bells, holding your breath, mouth already imagining the chewiness. Is it a fig? A prune? Even a date would be glorious. Anything but barley again. The bell rings. You mutter your lines with reverence and trembling hope. When the food slot scrapes again, you scurry toward it, and there it is. One single piece of fruit, crinkled and brown and holy. You chew it slowly, like it's the Eucharist itself. And somehow, in that moment, you feel full. You sit there, lips sticky with the remnants of that sacred prune, and realise something terrifying. You've spoken 0 words today. Not one. Not even a whisper to yourself. You thought you'd murmur during prayers, maybe hum a hymn or two, but nope. Your voice stayed buried deep in your throat like it's forgotten it exists. The rule doesn't say you can't talk, but there's no one to talk to. And soon, your tongue begins to feel like a stranger in your own mouth. That's when the weight of it hits you. This isn't solitary confinement. It's a theological contract. And at the centre of that contract is the rule. If this hermit life is the play, the rule is your script, stage directions, and very stern director. Depending on your monastery's order, Benedictine, Cistercian, Carthusian, you've got variations, but the core is the same. Obedience, silence, prayer, fasting, humility. No room for personal expression. No midnight journaling with a feather quill. The rule tells you when to sleep, when to kneel, when to blink. Okay, maybe not blink, but close. And because you're an anchorite, your version is even stricter. You don't get to do group labour like monks. No gardening to break up the day, no calligraphy sessions, no chanting in chorus. You're cut off from the communal life that frankly made monasticism survivable. In short, monks may live simply, but you live brutally. There's no conversation at dinner because there's no dinner table. There's no choir because there's no you in team. And even spiritual companionship, say, a wise elder to help you through doubt, doesn't exist. If you doubt alone. Some rules, like those influenced by the Anchorites, allow a spiritual advisor to visit your cell through a screen once a week. But visit is generous. It's usually a 2-minute confession behind a wooden grate. Think of it as the world's least satisfying podcast. And even that, optional. What's not optional? Penance. Lots of it. For everything. That wandering thought you had about warm bread? Penance. That moment your mind drifted during prayer? Penance. That time you looked a little too long through the squint at the courtyard? Oh yeah, double penance. So what does that mean, practically? Fasting, extra prayers, sometimes self-flagellation. Yes, that's right, you whip yourself. With a rope, a thorny branch, or anything suitably awful. Not every day, just when you're feeling particularly unworthy. You try it. Once. You wrap a little rope, swing half-heartedly, and immediately regret it. The sting is sharp, but the shame afterward is worse. You feel like you're pretending to be holy, cosplaying martyrdom, and yet that's the job description. Spiritual discipline wasn't about inner peace. It was about purification through discomfort. You find yourself counting the hours, not out loud, just in your head. The rule forbids idleness, so you pace your cell during breaks between prayer hours. 3 steps forward, turn, 3 steps back. It's a holy shuffleboard. Your feet carve little paths in the straw, and soon your cell looks like it's been divided into quadrants. Prayer corner, sleeping patch, pacing track, penance zone. Your body adapts. Your back hunches a bit from the cold. Your knees develop calluses. Your eyesight, adjusted only to candlelight and slits of daylight, begins to blur anything more than a few feet away. But your mind? That's where things get strange. Time starts to ripple. You can't remember what day it is, or how long you've been here. You try to keep count using the Psalms. You're on Psalm 51 today, so maybe that means day 51? Or did you reread that one a few times? Psalm 51 is the one that starts, "Have mercy on me, O God," and boy does it hit different now. Some anchorites carved tally marks into the wall. Others scratched prayers into the stone with nails, bones, or their own teeth. Seriously. There's a cell in Germany with the words Kyrie Ellison, Lord have mercy, gouged into every surface. You haven't gone quite that far. Yet. A quirky piece of trivia. Some anchorite cells were built with sloping floors. Why? So the bodily fluids, sweat, urine, sickness, would drain toward a corner. Medieval hygiene was more about managing filth than avoiding it. If you don't gag at least once a day, you're not doing it right. Even stranger. A few cells had internal wells, so the hermit wouldn't die of thirst, but most didn't. You depend entirely on the monastery for water. If they forget, or if it rains too hard to deliver safely, you wait, and pray not for salvation, but hydration. And here's a fun philosophical curveball. You're still technically a living saint, even if you snore and smell like boiled cabbage. People out there think you're holy. You, the one muttering to cobwebs and rearranging straw into spirals. The rule doesn't care how you feel. It only cares how you behave. Whether your knees are bleeding, your stomach empty, or your soul on fire, you follow the schedule. No applause, no check-ins, just another round of prayer and the quiet hope that someone out there remembers your name. You wake to the sound of your own teeth chattering. Again. The candle has long since gone out. The stone floor is sucking heat from your bones like it's jealous you have any. Your robe, once scratchy but warm, is now just a limp, smelly rag of woven resignation. You shift slightly, and your elbow bumps something soft. Oh right, your pillow, which is just a folded bit of cloth filled with straw and regret. Cold is a constant in here. It's not the dramatic storybook kind of cold that comes with icicles and howling winds. No, this is a quieter, crueler chill. The kind that seeps into your joints, camps behind your spine, and refuses to leave. Even monks in their drafty cloisters get communal fires. You get penance. You'd kill for a hot stone right now. But alas, no fires are permitted in the anchor hold. Heat is a luxury, and luxury leads to comfort, and comfort leads to temptation, and temptation... Well, you know the rest. You probably chanted it 3 times before dawn. Instead, you rub your hands together, blow into them, and try to wiggle life back into your fingers. It works a little. Not enough to make writing possible, but just enough to keep your nails from turning blue. Some anchorites wore hair shirts, rough garments made from goat hair worn under their robes. Imagine your worst wool sweater, then imagine it's made by medieval gilt and smeared with ashes. Why? To cause irritation. Because when you itch constantly, you're less likely to fall into sinful daydreams. Or so the theory goes. Historians still argue whether the purpose of hair shirts was spiritual discipline or just a social signal like, look how holy I am, I'm rashy and miserable. Either way, you're itchy now. So, success. You pace the cell a bit, although pace is generous. 3 awkward steps, turn, 3 steps back. Your knees click with each step. You're starting to feel ancient, and it's only been... You don't even know how long anymore. The cold has made your joints stiffer than a cathedral pew. But worse, it's started to settle into your mind. You find yourself slowing, pausing mid-thought, forgetting words, repeating prayers like a monkish version of a broken record. Sometimes you finish a psalm and don't remember starting it. Sometimes you look down and realize your hand has been tracing the same circle on the stone for an hour. They warned you about this. Solitude can purify the soul, yes, but it can also nibble away at the edges of the mind. It's not madness, not quite. More like thinning. Like the barrier between reality and dream is wearing down, and soon you won't know whether the rat in the corner is real or part of a particularly weird psalm. There's a moment, brief, barely a flicker, when you think about opening your mouth and yelling. Just one word, just to hear it bounce off the walls. But you don't, because you might like it. And if you like it, you might do it again. And if you do it again, it'll be harder not to, so you whisper a prayer instead. Barely audible, just enough to remind yourself your voice still exists. And then you sit. Again. This time, you sit beside the grave. Yes, that grave. The shallow trench dug into the back corner of your cell, your eventual bed, your permanent checkout line. It stares at you, not with eyes, but with presence. Some anchorites slept beside their graves every night. A few slept in them. Not for dramatics, just as a constant reminder. Memento mori. Remember death. It was practically a slogan in medieval religious life. Skulls carved into books, hourglasses beside crosses, even frescoes featuring happy dancing skeletons. In fact, there's a weird little tidbit from France. Some anchor holes included a small niche in the wall that held a real human skull, usually of the cell's previous inhabitant. A kind of roommate, you could say, a gentle reminder that you're next, comforting. You stare into the dark hollow of the grave, dirt, pebbles, maybe a worm or two wriggling deeper into the earth. You imagine yourself lying there, eyes closed, bones settling. No ceremony, no crowd. Just a slow sealing of the cell and the whispers of monks behind the walls. It should be terrifying, but it's not. It's grounding. You understand now why some people said anchorites were halfway to sainthood. They weren't better than anyone else. They were just done. Done with distraction, done with wanting, done with trying to prove anything. Or maybe that's just what they told themselves to make the silence feel like purpose. Outside, the wind starts to pick up. You hear it moaning through cracks in the stone, brushing leaves past your shuttered squint. You'd love to look, just to see a tree move, just to see something. But the squint is closed, and you don't open it. That's part of the discipline too. You try instead to picture what the world looks like now. Are the villagers lighting their fires? Are children playing near the well? Is someone in the bakery kneading dough, the scent of yeast and smoke swirling through the air? You ache for it, just a whiff of it. But no, that ache is the whole point. So you pull your robe tighter, press your back to the cold wall, and close your eyes. The stone is firm against your spine. The air is sharp in your nose. The silence returns like an old friend or a well-trained jailer, and you whisper the next psalm because that's what the rule says, because that's what there is, because there's nothing else. It's still dark. Or maybe it's early morning. Hard to tell. The slit to the altar lets in only the faintest glow, and your candle's long gone. You've stopped counting time in hours. You measure it now by how stiff your legs are when you rise, and by how dry your throat feels before the next bowl of tepid water arrives. This is when you pray. It's always when you pray. You kneel on your worn patch of stone, tracing the shape of the cross into the air with fingers that no longer bend quite right. The prayer comes slowly, like molasses poured in the cold. The words are familiar. Sometimes they're all you remember. The chants, the psalms, the murmured Latin verses, they're your oxygen now. And yet, every time you finish a prayer, the silence that follows is deafening. And cold. So cold. There's no fire allowed in the cell, and the logic behind that remains maddening. The idea is simple. Comfort leads to complacency. So you're denied the one thing that could make all this just slightly more bearable. You breathe into your hands, which are cracked, red, and always damp from the condensation dripping off the walls. There's a small bucket in the corner to collect it. You're well. You haven't had fresh water in a couple of days. The monks are late. Again. You try not to dwell on the discomfort. The rule says to focus on the divine, but it's hard to concentrate on eternity when your toes are numb and a spider has built a web across your only good sandal. Still, you endure. Because that's the job. Anchorites weren't prisoners. They were volunteers. And yet the conditions make a 21st century prison cell look like a luxury Airbnb. No bed, no fire, no windows, just a heavy robe, a hollow stomach, and your own unravelling thoughts for company. This was somehow considered an honourable life. Townspeople revered anchorites. They believed you were closer to God than anyone else. And it wasn't just metaphorical. Many believed the anchor hold itself was sacred space. The cell was consecrated before you moved in. Sometimes it was blessed by a bishop, sometimes by an entire procession. They treated it like a tomb, a holy one. During the sealing ceremony, some anchorites would even lie in their open graves while the priest read funeral rites. It was part of the performance, dying to the world, becoming holy through disappearance. Historians still debate whether these rituals were sincere expressions of devotion or community-sponsored martyrdom theatre. Probably both. There's something deeply medieval about the idea that to get closer to the divine, you had to get farther from everything else. You shift on the floor, your joints audibly protesting. The sensation of your limbs has become muted. You rub your knees, now permanently bruised from endless kneeling. You stretch out on your straw mat for a moment of rest, but even lying down has become a calculated risk. Too long in one position, and your body starts to freeze in place. And there's still the chill, not the bracing kind that wakes you up, but the creeping, aching type that gnaws at your joints and makes your spine feel like a frozen branch. You try wrapping your robe tighter around you, but it's threadbare now. Patches worn thin. You look like someone who lost a fight with a monastery laundry fire. You once read a verse about fire from the Psalms. He sends forth his word and melts them. You remember pausing on that line, wondering if you'd ever feel warmth again. Outside the cell, somewhere beyond those 2 feet of stone, life continues. You know this. You hear the occasional echo of voices from the courtyard, a bell ringing for lords, the clatter of a bucket, even laughter. That one's the worst, not because you begrudge them, but because it reminds you that joy still exists, just not for you. You shift your weight and crawl toward the food slot. A sound. Something slides through. You wait for the footsteps to recede, then pull the bundle toward you. Bread. Well, breadish. It's coarse, flat, slightly damp, made from barley or rye. There's no salt because flavour was considered suspiciously pleasurable, but it's solid. You chew slowly, each bite a meditation. You're aware of every crumb, every bit of resistance in the crust. Your teeth hurt, but it's worth it. You pray a blessing over it. You pray with it. Eating has become sacred ritual. Not because of gratitude, but because it breaks up the monotony. You wash it down with a few sips of water, murky, metallic, and a little slimy. You try not to think about what's floating in it. And then, back to prayer. Always back to prayer. The hours continue to pass. You know the rhythm by now, even without the bells. Your body becomes a sundial, reacting to the fading light, the ebb and flow of hunger, the repeated scraping of the food slot. You wonder, how long can the human body run on barley, psalms, and ambient frostbite? And the stranger part, how long can the human mind endure it? You think of other anchorites, famous ones like Richard Rolle or Christina of Markyate. Rolle supposedly described divine ecstasy during solitude. He said he could feel the fire of God in his chest. You? So far, all you feel is hypothermia in your toes. Still, you whisper his lines to yourself. In the heat of love, my soul burns. You stare at your hands, red, cracked, trembling. You whisper again. And for just a moment, one sliver of silence, your breath fogs the air in front of you, in the shape of a tiny flame. You start noticing things that shouldn't matter. The way the condensation drips down the same groove in the wall every morning. The exact sound the food slot makes when it scrapes. Slow, then fast, then clink. The particular rhythm of your own breathing when you chant Psalm 88. You're not going mad, at least not yet. But solitude is beginning to rearrange your brain. There's a sharp awareness that comes from isolation. A kind of hyper-focus. Without external noise, your senses reach for anything. The flick of a mouse's tail. The faint shifting of a beetle. The creak of your own spine. It's all you've got. And let's talk about that mouse. It's back. Again. You've started calling it Gregory. Not out loud, of course, but in your head, it's definitely a Gregory. He lives in the straw pile by the grave and emerges whenever food appears. You've tried shooing him off. He doesn't care. He knows you're not exactly fast-moving prey. You share the silence with him now. It's oddly comforting. But comfort isn't really on the menu here. You pull your robe tighter. The cold is in your teeth now, deep and aching. It never leaves. There's a reason medieval chroniclers use the phrase biting cold. It really does feel like something gnawing on you, piece by piece. The rule doesn't mention frostbite directly, but the underlying message is clear. Discomfort purifies. The body is temporary. The soul is eternal. So if your fingers go black and fall off, well, that's just one less thing to distract you from salvation. And no, you're not being dramatic. Some anchorites did lose toes, or entire feet, especially during brutal winters when snow piled against the outside wall and the food slot froze shut. Did they survive? Occasionally. The real question was never physical survival. It was spiritual endurance. Historians still debate whether the monasteries were negligent or simply uncompromising. After all, you chose this. They just made sure you stuck with it. You hear footsteps outside your cell. That's rare. You perk up, muscles tensing like a dog waiting for a treat. There's a knock. Once. That means something. The rule allows for one type of visitor, the priest. And only when absolutely necessary he might deliver confession. He might bring a relic. Or, if things have gotten really interesting, he might be checking whether you're still breathing. A voice comes through the wall, muffled, male, gentle. You crawl to the wooden screen in the corner, the confessional slit. He asks, "How is your soul?" What a question. You want to say something sarcastic like, "It's damp," but instead you murmur, "Tired." He offers absolution. Then silence. You wait, hoping he'll say more. Ask how you're feeling. Whether Gregory's gotten bolder, something, anything, but no. The priest murmurs a final blessing and walks away. You're alone again. Back to the chants. Back to the silence. You find yourself watching the dust now, how it spins lazily in a shaft of light coming through the squint. Medieval monks believed that every mote of dust could be a symbol, a reminder that everything returns to ash. You just think it looks like slow-motion snow. You remember snow. The last time you saw it was before you entered this cell. You were in the church courtyard, barefoot during the sealing ceremony. The ground was cold, hard. A single flake landed on your knuckle, melted instantly. You watched it vanish. The priest said, "From dust you came, and to dust you shall return." At the time, you thought it was poetic. Now it feels like prophecy. You crouch near the altar slit, trying to glimpse the altar beyond. It's Sunday. You can tell by the incense. It wafts through the narrow stone channel, clinging to the walls, curling around your shoulders. The scent is sharp, resinous, slightly sweet. You inhale deeply. It's the closest thing to a hug you've had in weeks. You try to time your prayer with the monks. Their voices echo faintly, ghost-like. You chant along under your breath, keeping pace. It's like singing in a choir that can't hear you, and wouldn't acknowledge you if it could. Some anchorites weren't allowed to join at all. Their job was simply to witness, observe, participate silently. You're like the medieval version of a live stream lurker, and yet something about that silence becomes sacred. You realize the paradox. By removing yourself from the world, you start noticing its details more intimately. You don't see the trees, but you remember their smell. You don't hear laughter, but you can still feel its echo. Pain sharpens memory, and silence gives it space to bloom. Back in the straw, Gregory returns. He's dragging a crumb twice his size. You watch him for a full 10 minutes, completely transfixed. This is your entertainment now. There's no Netflix in the anchor hold, unless you count mental reruns of every conversation you've ever had, which, let's be honest, you're already halfway through. You find yourself thinking about your old life, your family, the baker's daughter who used to smile at you, the priest who cried during sermons, the way the church smelled on rainy days. You're not supposed to dwell on the past. The rule discourages worldly longing. But you do it anyway, not to tempt yourself, just to remember that you were once real. And slowly, over time, those memories become your warmth. They're not distractions. They're your fire. You wake up sweating, which is strange because it's still freezing, but your chest is tight, your breath ragged, and your robe clings to you like wet parchment. You dreamed, again. Something vivid. A road. A crowd. Someone calling your name. You try to hold on to it, but it's already vanishing like smoke in the draught. Dreams have become your only travels now, and not all of them are comforting. Sometimes you dream of the village you left behind. Other times it's darker. Twisting corridors, whispering voices, faceless monks pulling you deeper into the cell. You try to wake yourself up during those. You don't always succeed. The rule doesn't talk about dreams, but you're starting to wonder if it should have. You shuffle to your knees and start to pray. Again. The words are worn smooth from repetition. They fall from your lips without thought, like breath. But today, something falters. You lose your place halfway through the psalm. The syllables slur. It's not that you're forgetting them. It's that they've stopped meaning anything. You pause, look around. Nothing has changed. The walls are still stone. The grave still waits. The candle stub hasn't grown legs and lit itself. And for the first time, a new thought creeps in. Not despair. Not loneliness. Boredom. Not the there's nothing on TV kind, but the heavy existential kind. The kind that settles into your bones and whispers, is this it? Forever? You expected pain. You expected hunger. You even expected visions eventually. But no one warned you that a life of silence and repetition could make your thoughts feel like they're being slowly drowned. And yet, you must not falter. That's what they say. You must persevere. So you try to snap yourself back into focus. You kneel harder, grip the wooden cross in front of you. You chant louder. You even bite your lip until it bleeds, just to feel something. And still, the silence swallows you. There's a long-standing debate among historians. Did most anchorites want to be forgotten? Or were they secretly hoping to be remembered forever? Did they choose the anchor hold as a path to heaven, or as a desperate plea for significance in a world that didn't offer much else? It's an honest question. Some anchorites were noble-born. They gave up wealth and titles for a cell no bigger than a goat pen. Others were peasants, fleeing scandal or grief. Some were women who wanted control over their own lives in a time when that was rarely an option. A few were probably just eccentric. But all of them made the same final choice. Walk in, stay in, die in. You remember the ceremony now, your own ceiling, the smell of incense, the priest's hands on your shoulders, the murmured prayers, the sense that something had ended and something else had begun. You had stood there proudly, stoic, holy even. The door closed, the world fell away, and now you're just here, alone. With a half-chewed prayer and a rat named Gregory, you shift your weight and wince. The straw bed is damp again. You are sweating, sure, but not that much. You lift a corner of the mat. Oh, mould. Wonderful. The cell is fighting back now. Your sanctuary has a spore problem. Medieval architecture, beautiful to look at, lousy at ventilation. You'll scrape away what you can with a splinter of wood, but it'll be back. Like everything else here, it lingers. You sit against the wall, legs pulled close. The robe clings to you, your bones ache. And still the day stretches ahead, full of prayer slots and bowl scrapes and damp silence. You stare at the crucifix again. This time, you speak directly to it. You ever get bored too, you mutter? Your voice cracks a little, like an unused hinge. And weirdly, it feels good. Just to hear something that isn't the echo of Latin or the skittering of a rodent. You look up at the slit to the altar. The light's different now, softer. Vespers soon. You know, by the way the dust is dancing in the beam, you could set your whole schedule by dust motes now. You have, actually. You've named some of them. Don't tell Gregory. He's possessive. You recite the Magnificat. That's part of Vespers. My soul doth magnify the Lord. You repeat it 3 times, slower each time, letting the syllables stretch. Not because you're more devout, but because it fills more of the silence. There's a strange kind of peace in that. And then, scrape. The food slot opens. A bowl slides in. You crawl over. Lentils today. Mushy, but edible. You eat slowly, scooping with your fingers. You don't care about manners anymore. You're not even sure if you remember what manners feel like. When it's gone, you lick the last smear from the rim. You sit back and sigh. One more prayer, then Compline, then sleep. Maybe another strange dream. Maybe another long night of staring into the dark. And maybe, just maybe, one more day survived. You've been rereading the same psalm for hours, not because it's your favourite, though it is kind of catchy in a please smite my enemies kind of way, but because there's literally nothing else to read. That one hand-copied manuscript of the Psalms is your only book, your only window into written language, and, let's be honest, your only form of indoor entertainment. Psalm 22. My God, why have you forsaken me? A classic. It's a little different when you're 6 weeks into never seeing another human face. You close the book, slowly, carefully, like it might break if you move too quickly. Not because you're reverent, though you are, but because it will break. Vellum doesn't like the damp, and the corners are curling like dying leaves. You lean back against the wall, there's a faint squish sound. That's the straw again, always moist, always slightly unsettling. You swear Gregory the rat prefers it this way. You look around your cell, and suddenly it strikes you just how absurd this is. It's you, a rat, a 150-year-old Bible fragment, and a literal grave. That's it. That's your life, and yet, you chose this. You weren't forced here. No one dragged you in chains. You walked to this stone coffin and said, yes, please. I'd like to live here forever and talk only to God, insects, and my inner monologue. Historians still argue whether that's bravery or delusion, but the answer's probably both. And you're not alone in that decision. Well, spiritually speaking, hundreds, maybe thousands of people across medieval Europe chose the same fate. Some cells were attached to churches. Others stood alone in the wilderness, built into cliffsides, forests, even next to swamps. Some anchorites lived for decades. Others lasted weeks. A few were pulled out forcibly when it became clear they weren't praying anymore, just muttering and making shapes in the dirt. And then there's you. You haven't cracked. Yet. But you're not exactly flourishing either. You've started noticing how your thoughts loop. They spiral, coming back to the same ideas over and over. That moment in your childhood when you broke the bread cart. That girl who winked at you during Lent. That one hymn that made you cry, even though you pretended it was just the incense. You think about them constantly. They become little stations of your internal cross. At first you tried to push them away. Focus on prayer, you told yourself. But after a while, they're all you have. Little films on repeat. Your own private cinema of memory and regret. You once thought you'd find enlightenment here. Clarity. But instead, you've found you. Unfiltered, unshaped, just raw, repetitive you. And in that weird way, it's spiritual. Because there's no hiding anymore. No pretending. No costumes. No audience. Just the truth. Echoing around a 6x10 stone cell like a wind chime with one sad note. You shuffle to the squint and crack it open a tiny bit. Just enough to see light. Maybe hear a bird. A sparrow flits past. You blink. You didn't expect that. A real, moving creature. You haven't seen one in weeks, months. You watch it land on the windowsill across the courtyard. It ruffles its feathers, looks around. Then, chirp. One note. Tiny. High. Defiant. You smile. Actual smile. It feels foreign on your face. For a brief, fluttering moment, you're not in the cell. You're in the world again. Then the sparrow flies off, and the silence returns. You close the squint. That was enough. You crawl to the altar ledge and start another psalm. Psalm 131. Surely I have calmed and quieted my soul. That one feels right. You whisper it slowly, and as you speak you notice something new. The silence doesn't seem quite so loud. It's still there, but now it feels balanced, like it's listening back. And that realization surprises you, because for the first time, maybe, you feel a response. Not a voice, not a vision, but a stillness that doesn't press on you. It surrounds you, supports you. Could that be God? Could it be madness? Could it be the fact that you haven't had real human interaction in so long that your psyche is now hugging itself for comfort? Yes, all three, simultaneously. You glance at Gregory. He's sleeping, curled up like a bean. You try not to disturb him. You think about Julian of Norwich again, how she called God a mother, how she said, all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. You whisper that too. Then you say it again, louder, and again, and again. And for just a moment it feels true. You stare at the wall for an hour. At least, you think it's an hour. You've long stopped tracking time the way you used to. There's no clock, no sunbeam dial. Just your breath, your pulse, and the shape of the dust as it shifts in the air. The spot you're staring at is nothing special. Just stone, pale grey. A faint vertical crack running down the centre like a half-closed eye. You imagine it blinking. You imagine it speaking. Then you blink, shake your head, and mutter, "Get it together." But even your voice sounds distant now, like someone else is speaking through you. The monotony of your days has become thick, like walking through syrup. Prayer, meal, prayer, silence, sleep, prayer, again, always again. And when that structure bends, when something changes even slightly, it's unsettling, like today. Because something does change. You feel it before you hear it. A tension in the air, a ripple in the quiet. Then, a voice, not in your head, not a dream, a real voice, from outside the squint. It's a woman's voice, old, soft, trembling. She says your name. You freeze. No one said your name in... How long has it been? Months? A year? You forgot what it sounded like from another's mouth. You creep to the squint. You open it. Just a sliver. She's kneeling on the other side, her hands clasped in prayer. Her face is deeply lined, her hair wrapped in a rough cloth. She looks like someone who's lost things, or someone who's seen too much. She asks you to pray for her son. He's sick, she thinks you can help. And that's when you remember, oh right, you're holy. Out there in the village, you're a kind of mystical figure. They call you the Walled One, or the Buried Soul. They believe your prayers carry more weight, that your suffering gives you power, which is ironic since you haven't felt powerful in weeks. You're not even sure if your prayers make it past the stone ceiling, but she believes. So you nod, silently. Then you pray. You pray harder than you've prayed in a long time. Not out of duty, out of connection. It feels good, real, to want something for someone else again. When you finish, she thanks you. Leaves something outside the squint, a piece of cloth, homemade, frayed but clean, a gift. You close the squint. You sit back. You cry. Just a little. Not from sadness, not from loneliness. From contact. Even brief, even silent. It reminds you that you're not invisible. That someone, somewhere, still knows you exist. That's the irony of this life. You're sealed away to forget the world. But the world refuses to forget you. And it happens again. Not daily, but enough. Someone comes by the squint to ask for a blessing, to beg for guidance, to whisper sins they can't say to their parish priest. They believe your cell makes you holy. Historians still argue about this. Some say anchorites became living relics, part saint, part symbol. Others believe villagers just needed someone they could project hope onto. A spiritual lightning rod. Either way, they keep coming. You find yourself speaking more. Just a few words, carefully chosen. You begin to think of your role not just as an observer, but as an intercessor, a vessel, and that scares you. Because what if you're not worthy? What if you're just a person in a box? The weight of expectation presses harder than the cold ever did, but the rule has advice for that too. Let your humility be known before God and man, but not performed for their sake. In other words, do the work, not the performance. You settle back into prayer. But now your prayers are different. They're not just about your own soul anymore. They stretch outward. They wrap around names, faces, stories. You find meaning again. Purpose. It's not the dramatic, trumpet-sounding purpose of saints and martyrs. It's quiet, worn in, like old shoes or smooth river stones. And with that purpose, the silence becomes gentler. You don't fight it as much. You lean into it. You start noticing beauty again, like how the candlelight dances on the wall at Compline, or how Gregory now brings 2 crumbs to his stash. You're suspicious. There may be another rat. You chant a psalm and hear the echo come back so perfectly it sounds like harmony, just for a moment. You hold that moment like it's fragile and holy. Because it is. This life still isn't easy. You still wake sore, cold, aching. Your fingers still bleed from the cracks. You still hallucinate smells sometimes. Fresh bread, rain, lavender. You still dream of the outside, but you no longer dream of escape. That's the difference. And it's subtle, but it matters. You look at the wall again, the same crack, the same dust. But it doesn't feel empty anymore. It feels inhabited. like something larger than you is sharing the space. Maybe it's God, maybe it's madness, maybe it's both. Arm in arm, kneeling beside you in the quiet, you are not a monk. That much is clear. Sure, you live by the rule, you chant the psalms. You eat what they give you and you sleep beside your own grave. But still, monks live together. Monks garden. Monks brew beer. Yes, really, bless them. Monks even argue quietly about Latin grammar in the library. You live in a tomb. There's no gardening here, no scriptorium, no warm cloisters echoing with the soft padding of sandals. Just this stone box, a thin slit to the altar, and the ache that never leaves your knees. So no, you're not a monk. You're worse. You're an anchorite. And to the medieval mind, that made you holier. Monks die to the world in metaphor. You died in practice. You had funeral rites. They said prayers over you. They literally bricked you in. Congratulations. You've spiritually out-monasticked the monks. And with that supposed holiness comes a weird kind of respect. In town, your name might be spoken in hushed awe. The walled one, they might whisper. She hasn't seen the sky in 10 years. He hasn't heard his own name spoken since the king's last war. They think you're holy, closer to God. You think you smell like mouldy wheat and haven't felt your toes in 3 days. That discrepancy is surreal. And yet, it's what you signed up for. Well, sort of. Anchorites came in all flavours. Some were chosen, like literally picked by their local priest or bishop, because they showed early signs of spiritual readiness. Or in modern terms, they were really quiet and a little odd. Others volunteered after visions, losses or breakdowns, and a few were gently encouraged by towns that weren't quite sure what to do with them. Historians still argue whether this was sainthood or soft exile, and it's hard to say. The early church viewed anchoritism as one of the highest spiritual callings. But let's be honest, sometimes it was just the best option left for a widow, an orphan, or someone who didn't fit anywhere else. But the status. Oh, the status. Anchorites were given titles. They were mentioned in parish records. Townspeople brought gifts, eggs, bread, candles, sometimes even gossip, left at the squint like offerings at a shrine. Imagine being so revered you could offer advice to the mayor, from your dirt pile. Some even gained local fame. Their prayers were said to heal the sick, ward off storms, protect harvests. You weren't just spiritual, you were practically magical. But here's the joke. Inside the cell, you're not doing anything different than you were before. You're still praying, still kneeling, still trying to remember if Psalm 17 comes before or after 18, still wondering if Gregory is plotting something, and yet outside people act like every breath you take is dripping with divine favour. You try not to let it go to your head. That's part of the rule too. Humility above all things, no pride, no vanity, no smug satisfaction that the baker's wife left you a warm heel of rye because she swears your intercession healed her cow, though it was a particularly good cow. Still, the adoration feels misplaced. You're not levitating, you're not glowing, you're not even bathing. But people need something to believe in. A symbol, a holy ghost made of flesh. And maybe, by disappearing, you've become visible in a new way. Visible as what, though? That depends. In some towns, anchorites were loved, respected, protected, consulted like local oracles. In others, they were feared, considered too holy to approach, or worse, slightly haunted. Because let's face it, what kind of person chooses this? You've heard the stories. The anchorite who walled herself in so completely she refused food and died within the week. The one who only ate what crows brought. The one who claimed to hear angels but actually just shouted at birds. You're not that far gone, yet, but you can see the path. You can feel how the silence becomes heavy, how the monotony sharpens or dulls depending on the day, how the structure meant to guide you can sometimes suffocate you instead. You sit, legs folded beneath you, eyes closed, and in that stillness you realise something. You're different now, not better, not saintly, but altered. The world beyond your wall feels more distant, but the one inside, the one made of breath and thought and prayer, that one feels closer, more real. You used to pray like a monk, structured, formal, intellectual. Now you pray like someone on fire, raw, repetitive, desperate, tender. And sometimes it feels like someone listens. Not every time, not even most times, but sometimes. You whisper into the silence and it whispers back, not in words, but in that strange, sacred stillness. Like when the wind stops and everything holds its breath. You're not a monk, you're something else now, something smaller, and maybe something more. You sit by the wall again, your back against the cool stone, the familiar ache pulsing in your lower spine. You've lost all sense of posture. You probably sit like a shrimp now, a very devout, very cold shrimp. The candle is burned halfway down. The light flickers and throws your shadow against the far side of the cell. It looks taller than you, straighter, stronger. Not you at all, really. You reach for the Psalms, but you don't open the book this time. You already know the words. They live in you now, sewn into your breath like seams. You could probably chant them in your sleep. Maybe you already do. And in this moment of stillness, a question settles gently across your shoulders. Why did you choose this? You haven't asked yourself in a while, not properly. At first you told people it was about holiness. You wanted to draw closer to God, to leave behind worldly temptations. Maybe you even believed that. Maybe part of you still does. But deeper than that, quieter, almost afraid, you know there was something else. Maybe you were running. Not away from the world exactly, but from something in it. A grief, a shame, a desire you couldn't name in public, a wound you didn't know how to heal. Anchorites didn't all choose the cell because they were pious. Some chose it because they were broken, and this life gave that brokenness a structure, a reason, a way to stop the bleeding without having to explain the wound. You think of the others who came before you, the nameless souls whose graves lie beneath other cells like this one. Some of them wrote nothing, left behind no words, just indentations in the stone floor where their knees wore grooves over the years. Those grooves are prayers too. Historians still puzzle over why the practice of anchoring flourished so widely during the 12th to 15th centuries. Was it religious fervour? Social pressure? A quiet epidemic of grief no one knew how to name? Probably all of it. One letter survives from an anchoress to her bishop asking for permission to be enclosed. In it she writes, "My soul is in great unrest. I would bury it in silence." You understand that now. This wasn't escape. It was containment. A way to name the pain without having to explain it. You feel that pain return sometimes. Even after all this time, it doesn't shout. It waits, patiently, like a cat under the bed. So you give it something to do. You give it prayer. You give it rhythm. You wrap it in the Psalms and kneel with it beside the altar slit. Because if it has to stay with you, it might as well be useful. You shift slightly. The candle wobbles. The wax has pooled into a strange shape on the ledge, like a river with no banks. You wonder how many candles you've burned by now. 100? More? If each was a marker of a day, then you've been here a long time. Time is strange. You've stopped counting. Not because you don't care, but because it doesn't serve any purpose. There's nothing to look forward to. No seasonal festival. No birthday. No harvest. No spring thaw. It all comes and goes outside your cell. You don't mark it anymore. You feel it. The way your joints stiffen more in winter. The way the food changes. Thinner soup in spring. Barley cakes in fall. The way birdsong returns faintly through the squint after the long silent snow. You're part of nature in a way that no longer needs clocks. You pray when the light shifts. You eat when the bowl arrives. You sleep when the air gets heavy with darkness. And oddly, this has made you calmer. Not always. You still cry sometimes. You still rage quietly, balling your fists and pressing them into your thighs. You still talk to Gregory like he's your spiritual advisor, but mostly you are calm, not happy, not fulfilled, but grounded. The cell has become your skin. You no longer flinch at its confines. You no longer push against the walls in your sleep. You belong to it now. You still remember the moment you entered, how final it felt, how brave you tried to seem, how part of you hoped someone, anyone, would stop you before the door closed. No one did, and now no one can. But that's okay, because this was always a choice, and you've made peace with it. You hear the bell ring faintly in the distance. Time for vespers. You kneel, your knees crack. One day they might just not get up again. You chant, "Let my prayer be set before thee as incense." And outside, a woman kneels by the squint again. She doesn't speak, but you know what she wants. So you pray. For her, for the sick, for the lost, and yes, for yourself. Because even saints, if that's what they think you are, need prayer too. It begins like any other day, dim light filtering through the squint. The usual damp settling in your robe, Gregory rustling in his corner like a monk sneaking wine. You're mid-prayer when you hear it. A soft knock on the outer wall, deliberate, rhythmic. Then a voice. "Bless me, Father." It's not the same woman as last time. This one's younger, nervous. Her voice cracks midway through the request. You can't see her. She's on the far side of the wall, outside the squint, but you can feel her. That unmistakable energy of someone not sure if they're brave or desperate. "I don't know who else to talk to," she says. You pause. Wait. Let the silence open like a door. Then gently you speak. "You may." And just like that, the squint becomes a confessional. She tells you about her husband, about his drinking, about her shame, her fear, her prayers that seem to vanish like mist. She confesses not to sin, but to helplessness. And you listen. What else is there to do? Your cell, this cold box of stone, has somehow become more than your tomb. It's become a lighthouse. A small one, yes, but steady. People keep coming. A boy, barely older than 12, wants help finding a lost lamb. A merchant's wife asks for protection before a dangerous journey. A man with shaking hands leaves a bag of apples and whispers, "My brother is dying." They all believe your prayers matter, that your silence amplifies your voice. You never expected this. When you entered, you thought you were disappearing, but instead, you've become a kind of presence, a mystery, a spiritual antenna poking through the fabric of daily life. And it's strange, because nothing inside you feels particularly holy. You're tired, your back hurts. Sometimes you forget what psalm you're on. One time, you definitely prayed for the wrong name by mistake. You're just a person in a robe. But in here, through these walls, you've become something else to them. A listener, a vessel. And this is deeply, weirdly medieval. In the Middle Ages, communities needed tangible links to the divine. Saints' relics, sacred wells, priestly hands, and anchorites. They were living relics. Not dead bones in a box, but breathing. Whispering symbols of suffering with purpose. Some towns even named streets after their anchorites. One woman in 14th century England, known as Anchoress Emma, had so many visitors that her bishop begged her to stop giving out spiritual advice. It was interfering with proper clergy channels. Historians still argue whether anchorites were spiritual therapists, holy figureheads, or just convenient placeholders for hope. But one thing is certain, the people needed them, and now people need you, which would be touching, if it weren't also exhausting. Because with each visit you absorb their fears, you carry their stories, you sit in silence and hold their pain, and you have nowhere to put it down. You try to pray it away, you light the candle, you kneel until your knees scream, but some of it sticks. Some of it crawls into your ribs and settles there. And sometimes you wonder, are they coming to you, or hiding behind you? Are you holy? Or are you just a wall they can't see past? That night you lie awake listening to the wind. It howls, wild and moaning. The candle's long out, and the dark feels especially thick. You start to imagine faces in the stone, shapes moving in the cracks. You sit up, rub your eyes, shake your head, just fatigue, or something else. You recall one of the strangest stories you ever heard. A hermit in 12th century France claimed to see angels, not in dreams, in the walls. He said they pressed their wings against the stone and whispered the names of the dead. He also said they smelled like myrrh and garlic. You don't smell anything tonight except mould and wax. Still, the silence feels charged. You kneel, whisper Psalm 121. I lift up my eyes to the hills. No hills here, just stone. But the act of lifting, that part matters. The next day there's a flower at the squint, pressed, dried. Probably stolen from the church's side altar. It's a simple offering, no note, no voice. Just thanks. You set it beside your altar, and for the first time in weeks, you smile without irony. You're still a hermit, still alone, still tired and itchy and possibly covered in rodent dander, but you're also part of the world again, not in body, but in presence. And that somehow keeps you upright. You whisper the psalm again. This time the silence doesn't press, it cradles. You're halfway through a psalm when it happens. A sound, subtle but wrong. Not the usual wind, not Gregory's skittering paws, not the scrape of the food slot. It's softer, more deliberate, knuckles on stone. Your breath catches. You wait. Then a voice. Low, Male. Too familiar. Forgive me, sister. You know that voice. It's been years since you heard it, but your body remembers before your mind catches up. The slight tremble in your stomach. The warmth that threatens to rise like a forgotten ember. You don't move, but your thoughts tumble like leaves in a storm. His name, his hands, his laugh, his promises. You buried all of that, you think. You were sealed here. That part of your life is gone. But desire doesn't follow the rule. He speaks again. I shouldn't have come. I needed to know you were alive. And with that, the walls crack. Not literally, but emotionally. The silence, once sacred, now feels exposed. Your cell isn't a sanctuary anymore. It's a stage. You feel seen in a way that makes your skin itch. Desire is forbidden here. Not just the physical kind, but even the flicker of longing. Even memory can feel like sin if it smells like warmth. You clench your robe, kneel harder, whisper a prayer so fast it trips on itself. He doesn't say anything else. Just footsteps, then nothing. The silence returns, but it's not the same. It's thicker, charged. Like the walls know what you're thinking. You curse yourself for how alive you felt, and how quickly you miss it. That night, your dreams are full of him. Not romantic, not scandalous. Just familiar. The way he cut bread, the shape of his boots, the quiet way he waited for your answers. You wake up sick with nostalgia. You press your forehead to the cold stone. You pray so hard your throat goes raw. Because here's the thing about anchoritism no one told you. The temptation doesn't come from outside. Not really. It comes from memory. And memory doesn't respect stone walls. Historians still debate how anchorites handled these moments. Some confessed them. Some fasted. Some slept in their grave trenches until the feelings passed. Some claimed divine visions chased the sin away. And some invited the temptation in, imagined it, fed it, until it hollowed them out completely. You don't want to be that last one, so you fast. Not because it's required, but because your heart is too loud. You skip the bowl when it slides through the slot. You spend extra hours in prayer. You hum the psalms under your breath like lullabies meant to drown your thoughts. Gregory even avoids you. You're vibrating with self-flagellating intensity. The next day, someone else visits the squint. A different voice, a soft voice, a child. Are you the holy woman? You hesitate. You say, I am a woman who prays. She giggles. That's what Mama said you'd say. The child asks you to bless her new lamb. She says his name is Onion. You blink. You promise to pray for Onion. And suddenly the tension from the day before lifts. Not completely, but just enough. You realize the past knocked on your wall, and you didn't open the door. That counts. Temptation isn't sin, but welcoming it in, that's where the trouble begins. Still, you carry it now, not like a stain, but like a scar, faint, tender, a reminder that you were once loved, that you are still capable of love, and that perhaps even here, in a cell made of stone and silence, there is room for that truth. But love now must wear a different robe. It must kneel beside you, speak in psalms, let go of its name. You look at the crucifix again. For once, it feels less judgmental, and more knowing, as if it too remembers what it means to be torn between flesh and spirit. You light the candle, the flame flutters, wavers, then steadies. You whisper, thank you. To God? To memory? To him? Maybe all three. And you pray, not to forget, but to continue. You haven't spoken in 2 days, not out of discipline, just because there hasn't been a reason. No knocks on the wall, no voices at the squint, no interruptions. Only the scratching of Gregory as he rearranges his straw empire, and the occasional creak of your own joints as you move from prayer to pacing to sitting still, waiting for your thoughts to settle. But they don't. Not today. Today your thoughts are strange, blurred around the edges. You keep thinking you hear something, bells, footsteps, whispers, but nothing's there. At least, not really there. You're starting to wonder if the silence is speaking back. And if so, what language it's using. You kneel, begin another psalm. Halfway through, you pause. A shape moves across the wall. Just a shadow, you tell yourself. Just the candle flickering. You look again. Gone. You keep praying, Then, another sound. Not a knock, not a scrape. More like a whisper. Just outside your hearing, like wind but with intent. You freeze. This is the part in old stories where something enters the room. You don't move. You don't breathe. Your heartbeat is so loud it might qualify as noise pollution. But nothing comes. Still, something feels different. The air is heavier. You look toward the grave in the corner. It's dark. Still. But your mind starts to fill in details that aren't there. Shapes. Movements. Eyes. You shake your head, laugh under your breath. You're imagining things, you whisper, except you said it aloud, and something answers. Not a voice, not exactly. A shift, a feeling, a presence. You kneel again, this time not in habit, but in instinct. Not in routine, but in fear. Not all hermits encountered demons, but some did. At least that's what they claimed. The line between vision and delusion was thin in the medieval world. Very thin. St. Anthony, the desert father, was tormented by beasts, voices, phantoms. He said they clawed at him in the dark, laughed in his ears, tempted him with flesh and fury and despair. Historians still argue whether these were hallucinations from solitude, spiritual metaphors, or actual full-on breakdowns from prolonged sensory deprivation. But to the Anchorites, they were real. You close your eyes and recite a psalm louder now. Psalm 91, the protection one. He shall cover thee with his feathers, and under his wings shalt thou trust. You say it again, and again, until your voice steadies, and then the feeling lifts, just like that, like whatever it was decided to leave, or at least to hide better. You don't open your eyes for a long time. When you do, everything looks the same, and completely different. There's a phrase monks used, the noonday devil. It wasn't about nighttime horrors. It was about that midday moment when the mind starts to unravel, when time stretches like dough, when the silence stops feeling sacred and starts feeling dangerous. You've met that devil now, and it's not fire and horns, it's boredom, it's memory, it's the creeping whisper that nothing means anything anymore. You rise slowly, light the candle, the flame flutters, stays, you take it as a sign. You sit near the slit to the altar and breathe. Just breathe. No psalm this time, just silence. But it's not his silence anymore. The whispering one, the one that crawls. This silence is yours. You reach for the psalms again, not out of fear, but out of return. You open to Psalm 27. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? And you say it with a little more force than usual. Like you're reminding something that you remember who you are. The rest of the day is uneventful. No voices, no knocks, not even Onion's owner asking for a second lamb blessing. You welcome the quiet now, because it was nearly stolen from you. You settle into your bed of straw. Listen to Gregory softly squeak in his sleep. You think again about those stories. The hermits who saw things, felt things, heard things in the dark. Maybe it wasn't madness. Maybe solitude strips the veil. Maybe silence reveals what noise hides. Or maybe you're just tired. Either way, you whisper Psalm 4. I will lay me down in peace and sleep. And this time, you do. You wake with a strange clarity. For once, no dream clings to your brain like fog. No phantom voices echo. Just your own breath, even and steady, the candle barely flickering beside your altar slit. You feel present, which is rare. Most mornings, your first thought is a blend of hunger, stiffness, and half-remembered psalms. But today you feel awake, so naturally you decide to suffer, not out of guilt, out of rhythm, out of habit, out of something deeper you don't quite name anymore. Today's a fasting day. You ignore the bowl when it scrapes in through the slot. You hear the footsteps pause, just slightly. Maybe the monk wonders, maybe he doesn't. Maybe they've long stopped wondering about anything that happens in here. You light the candle, kneel in prayer, and begin Psalm 38. There is no soundness in my flesh because of thine anger. A little dramatic, maybe, but appropriate, because you're about to flagellate. Yep, that ancient spiritual practice where the body is disciplined through pain. It's not a punishment. Not really. It's a sharpening, a way of turning the body into a vessel of focus, of humility, of penitence, You unwrap the cord, just a simple rope, rough, enough to sting. You take a breath. You don't do it hard. You're not trying to faint or bleed. Just remind yourself, your flesh, your mind, your distracted soul, that you're not here to feel good. And it works. The sting wakes you up. A snap of pain across the back, a jolt through your spine. You keep praying. Another strike, another verse. You lose track of the rope. Your breath comes sharp. You start to sweat despite the cold. And after a while, you stop. Not because you're done, but because you feel hollowed, like a bell that's finally quiet. You sit, eyes closed, palms up. And the strangest thing happens. You feel joy. Not the loud, laughing kind. Not even the warm, teary kind. Just a quiet, shimmering pulse at the base of your spine. A sense of having aligned something, like the gears have clicked back into place. And for a moment, just a flicker, you feel holy. It's not a feeling you chase. Not really. But when it comes, it's unmistakable. Anchorites often described these moments. A sudden sense of divine presence, like light entering through cracks in the skull. Some called it ecstasy. Others feared it. One anchoress said it felt like her heart was a chalice, and God poured fire into it until she could no longer breathe. You get that now. The body, softened by hunger and cold and repetition, opens to things it once resisted. Visions, voices, or maybe just clarity. You remember what Julian of Norwich wrote in her cell. He did not say, "Thou shalt not be troubled," but he said, "Thou shalt not be overcome." You whisper it aloud, and then something flickers at the edge of your vision. You turn quickly. It's nothing. Probably. You close your eyes again. Try to return to that stillness. But the flicker stays with you. And later that night, the dreams return. Only this time, they're not memories. They're strange. You're kneeling in your cell, but it's filled with water. Waist deep still, clear. Your robe floats around you like seaweed. And above you, no roof, just sky. Stars, endless, vivid. And one drops, slowly, like a bead of silver. It touches your shoulder. You wake with a gasp, heart pounding, candle burned out. The air is freezing, but your chest feels warm. You don't know what it means. You don't need to. You reach for the Psalms, open to wherever your fingers land. Psalm 42. Deep calls unto deep. You pause. That line, it echoes in your bones. You whisper it again, and you think, maybe that's what this is. Not madness, not punishment, but depth calling to depth. Suffering shaping silence. Silence shaping prayer. Prayer shaping something else. You don't have a name for it yet. You don't need one. You're still here. Still sealed. Still aching. And yet, somehow, still becoming. You're famous now. Not really, of course. Not in the way kings are, or bishops, or travelling minstrels who write catchy songs about talking animals and tavern brawls. But famous enough. You can tell because the knocks on your wall are more frequent. The food slot delivers not just soup but offerings, dried herbs, a twist of honeycomb, once even a single quail's egg in a little cloth nest. That one made you cry, not because of the egg, because of the care. You don't know how the rumours started. Maybe the boy with the lamb, onion, maybe the woman with the sick husband who later recovered. Maybe the merchant who claimed his dream stopped once you prayed over his wife's handkerchief. Whatever it was, the legend has grown. They say your cell glows at night. They say you speak with angels. They say you've never eaten, not once, and still you live. All of it is wrong, but none of it surprises you. Because this is what people do. They wrap holiness in mystery. They need miracles, not the big ones, but the small ones, the survivable ones, the everyday, quiet proofs that the world is not as cruel as it seems. And you're now their proof. You're a miracle in a robe that hasn't been washed since last spring and smells vaguely of smoke and feet. Congratulations. A monk stops by your squint one morning, hurried and red-faced. He doesn't speak at first, just drops something in. A letter. You blink. It's rare enough for someone to send a message. Rarer still for it to be written. You unfold it carefully. The ink is messy. The Latin is rushed. The message is simple. A widow in the next village heard of your prayers. Her child is dying. Will you intercede? You close the letter, press it to your chest. You say nothing aloud. Just walk to the altar, kneel, and begin. Not a chant, not a formula. just words. You don't know the boy, you don't know the mother, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that someone believes you can help, that your silence has weight, that your prayers move something greater than you. This is the strangest part of the whole thing. You entered the cell to disappear, to vanish, to die to the world. And now, the world keeps trying to resurrect you, to pull you back through the walls, through whispers and gifts and tiny trembling hopes. Some anchorites resisted it, sealed their squints permanently, refused all visitors, became statues. Others leaned into it, gave sermons, dictated visions, became spiritual celebrities. Julian of Norwich did both, spent decades writing her revelations in silence, then became so renowned that pilgrims travelled across kingdoms to sit beneath her window. You wonder which path you're walking. You never asked for this. You never intended to become a story. But stories, like mice, don't care about intention. They find cracks, they burrow, they build nests. And before you know it, they live here too. You hear the pilgrims before you see them. Well, before you don't see them, technically. They whisper outside your wall. They kneel. One leaves flowers. A child sings a song. You don't respond. You never do. That's the rule. But you hear them. You absorb it. You sit beside the altar slit and pray, not because it's time, but because you want to. Because someone out there believes that the words of a sealed soul might help them sleep tonight. You think of your former life, the noise, the confusion, the ache of longing you didn't have a name for. That ache never left. It just changed shape. Now it lives in your hands when you pray, in your throat when you whisper names you've never heard before, in the hollow behind your ribs that used to house desire and now houses purpose. Sometimes you think, what if I am holy? What if that ridiculous myth, the one that says suffering opens the door to something larger, what if it's true? What if the pain and the silence and the grave in the corner are actually a kind of portal? And other times you think, no, you're just cold and lonely and trying to give meaning to the meaningless. Both thoughts feel true. You hold them together, they hum against each other like prayer bells. You fall asleep that night with your hand resting on the letter. Not because you need to remember the words, but because you need to remember that someone, somewhere, believes your voice still matters. You wake to silence again. But this one's different. There's a kind of weight in it, a thickness, like the world is holding its breath. You feel it before you open your eyes. Something's changed. Then, clang, the sound of the outer bell, sharp, urgent, wrong. Not a prayer bell, a signal. You sit up quickly, heart thudding. Your cell is unchanged, but your nerves are already humming. That bell doesn't ring unless something serious is happening. War? Fire? Plague? You shuffle to the squint, push it open just enough to hear. Voices, shouting, distant, too many at once. You strain to make sense of it, but it's muffled. Just snatches, left in the night, no warning, won't open the chapel. Your stomach tightens. You want more than anything to see, but the squint only shows the same patch of grass and stone. Then a knock, fast. Not the usual slow, reverent tap. This one's frantic. Please, someone says. You crawl to the wall. I know you don't answer. I know. But we need you. The abbot's fallen ill. Fever. They say it's spreading. You press your fingers to the wall. Close your eyes. Of course. Plague. You've heard of it. Everyone has. But it always felt like a story. Something distant and grim, but not real. Now it's here. You whisper a prayer, one of the emergency ones, the kind you keep for storms and deathbeds, and then, quietly, I hear you. The voice outside stops, then softer. Thank you. You don't say anything else. You don't have to. Because right now, your job is to pray, to hold still, to be the unmoving point around which the panic turns. You return to the altar, kneel. Psalm 91 again. He shall deliver thee from the snare of the fowler and from the noisome pestilence. You don't need to look that one up. Everyone knows it. Every monastery whispers it when the sickness comes. You chant it all morning. By noon there's another knock. This time a bowl slides through, covered, wrapped in linen. The fabric is marked with soot, a sign. You know what it means. Don't touch this if you're not already marked. The monks are trying to contain the plague. You don't eat, you don't drink. You light the candle, open the psalter, and read until your eyes blur. Time becomes irrelevant again. But this time, it's not just prayer for purification. It's prayer for the living, the barely living, the afraid. And suddenly your cell feels less like a tomb and more like a watchtower. Not tall, not grand, but constant. People continue to come. They don't knock now, they just leave things. Notes, bits of cloth, tokens, names mostly, scrawled on parchment, scratched into wood. You receive them through the squint, pile them beside your candle, read each one aloud before the flame. Some are names of the sick, some are names of the dead. You begin to memorize them, whisper them as you kneel, fold them into psalms like seams. Your cell becomes a reliquary of stories you'll never witness, but will carry all the same. And then, one morning, the voices stop. Completely. No knocks, no footsteps, not even birdsong. You squint through the slit. Nothing. No smoke from the kitchen hearth. No sound of the novice dropping the bucket into the well. Not even Gregory scratching at the wall. The monastery is still. Too still. You ring the bell rope once, twice. Nothing. You ring again, harder. Still nothing. And in that moment you realize you might be the only one left. It's not terror you feel. Not quite. It's something older, deeper. The feeling of being reduced, refined, distilled into the very essence of stillness. This was always a possibility. Anchorites knew this. Some cells in history were found decades later. Skeletons curled near candles, books open to psalms, stone walls etched with prayers. Nobody checked in. Nobody disturbed them. Because anchorites weren't meant to be visited. They were meant to be trusted. Trusted to endure, to pray, to die without spectacle. And you light another candle. You pick up the next name, and you whisper it. One more voice in a world that's gone quiet. One more ember in a world gone dark. You don't eat for 3 days, not because of discipline. Not out of fasting, because no one brings food, no sound, no bowl scraping through the slot, no fabric-wrapped bundles, no names tucked in prayer folds, just stillness. You tap the stone gently, once, twice, just to hear something. It echoes. You feel your ribs more prominently now. Each breath is a little deeper, as if your body is reaching for something that isn't there. You've never been this alone before. Not when you first entered, not during the silent weeks, not even when your name disappeared from the monastery rolls. This is true solitude. You think of the bell rope, the only lifeline between you and the outside world. You pull it again. Wait. No response. Of course not. You light the candle, pray, sit, sleep, wake, repeat. You're doing everything right, everything the rule requires, everything you signed up for, but no one is left to care. And that's when the thought sneaks in, quiet and cold. What if I die? And no one knows. It's not fear, it's curiosity. You imagine it. You, slumped beside the altar, hands still clutching the psalter, eyes open to nothing. Your breath fading gently into the stone. Then, stillness. Weeks later, maybe months, a traveller finds your cell, sees the candle stubs, the pile of names, the gnawed edge of the psalter where Gregory got curious, and your body folded in prayer. They'll say she died as she lived, but you'll know the truth. You didn't die in glory, you died in duty, quietly, diminished. Just one more sealed soul. That's the real endgame here, isn't it? You don't become a martyr. You don't ascend in fire or fanfare. You fade. And the strange part? You're okay with that. Because this cell taught you something the world couldn't. That meaning isn't loud. That purpose doesn't require applause. That sanctity doesn't sparkle. It sits in the cold. It prays without listeners. It weeps without comfort. And it continues anyway. You reach for the psalms again. Your fingers tremble. Weakness creeps in through the edges of your muscles. Your body knows it's slipping. But your mind, sharper than ever. You open to Psalm 116. Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints. You laugh. Quietly. Not mockingly. Just because it's absurd. If anyone's watching, they sure picked a grim little camera angle. And yet you believe. Still. Because if this was all for nothing, then why does your heart still beat calmly as you say those words? Why do your lips still move in prayer? Why do the names still live inside your mind, even now? You whisper them, one by one, even the ones you thought you'd forgotten. a child named Isabel, a merchant named Tovin, the woman who brought you the egg, the boy with the lamb named Onion. You say them all. Your body is shaking now. You're on your knees, but you don't know how long you can stay there. You pull the candle closer, try to light it. Your hands won't cooperate. The spark flickers, misses, sparks again, catches, a tiny flame. It sways, alive. You stare at it like it's a miracle, because it is. And then, from somewhere deep inside you, a sound, not from outside, from within. A voice you haven't heard in weeks, your own, singing, not beautifully, not strong, just a faint chant, a psalm you don't remember choosing, but it carries, it echoes, and it's enough. You crawl toward the bell rope, wrap your fingers around it, you pull once, twice, 3 times, then you collapse beside the altar. You don't know if anyone hears, you don't know if anyone's alive to listen, but the rope moved, and that's enough. You close your eyes and rest. You wake to warmth, not heat, not fire, just not cold. Your first thought is that you're dead. The grave beside you waits, as always. The candle has burned out. Gregory is nowhere to be seen, but something is different. The light, it's golden. You blink, once, twice, and realize the squint is open. You didn't open it. You crawl toward it slowly, every muscle humming with protest. Your knees slip on the worn stone, but you press on. Outside, sun. Not grey light, not frost glow, but sun. Honest, buttery, late spring sunlight, and a face. A young monk, eyes wide, lips parted, holding a bowl. He looks at you like he's seen a ghost. "Forgive me," he whispers. "We thought no one survived." You can't speak. Not yet. You reach for the bowl, but your hands don't cooperate. He gently places it on the ledge. His fingers are warm. He doesn't leave, not immediately. He stands there, eyes shimmering, like he's unsure whether to cry or bow. You finally manage a whisper. "How long?" He answers slowly. "The plague swept through in days. The abbey emptied in a week. I was sent here to tend what was left." He hesitates. "They told me not to bother with the anchor hold, that it would be empty." You look down at the bowl. Soup, real soup, thick, fragrant. You sip, slowly. It burns your tongue in the best possible way, and in that moment the cell becomes something new. Not a tomb, not even a shrine, but a kind of threshold. You are alive, still sealed, still cloistered, but alive, and that changes everything. The monk returns later with more than food. He brings fresh cloth, a scrap of parchment, a candle. He asks if you want the squint widened. You shake your head. Not yet. Because your prayers have never been louder. Not with your voice, but in your silence, your presence. Word spreads. Again. The Anchorites survived. The people come back. Not in crowds, not all at once, but enough. The squint becomes a postbox, a prayer wall, a tether. Some leave notes. Others just kneel. One child sings. Again. The names return. And you, still wrapped in weakness, still shivering from the edge of death, hold them all, one by one, fold them into your psalms and whisper them to the quiet. You no longer fear dying here. Because you've done something harder. You stayed. You endured when even death lost interest. And you're still praying, still breathing, still becoming. And so, as the day dims and the first stars blink into the dusk, you lie down beside your grave, not in dread, but in peace. Because now you know, the cell did not bury you, it made you. And now the candle gutters low. Your robe wraps gently around your tired frame, and the stone beneath you no longer feels so cruel. It's just there, like the sky or the sea, enduring, unmoving, honest. The prayers have been said. The silence has been honoured. The flicker of madness, of memory, of desire. They all came, sat beside you, and passed like weather through an open door. Now there is only breath. Yours, measured, slow. The light from the squint softens into blue. The stars outside hang quiet and clean. You wonder if someone is kneeling by the wall tonight, if they are whispering their name, hoping it reaches your lips before you sleep. You will say it in your dream, if not aloud. You will carry it through the hush of your cell like a candle between cupped palms, because that's what you do now. You hold light, not a blaze, not a fire, just a small steady glow in the dark, and it's enough. So rest now. Feel the cool air settle across your brow. Let the grave beside you sleep for one more night. You've given all that was asked, and received more than you ever imagined. You're not alone, not anymore. You never really were. Now, close your eyes. Let the silence have you, not to end you, but to keep you, to cradle you, until the next breath, until the next name, until the next whisper in the dark. Good night, friend. You made it. 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 Friend.